Hey guys, tonight we slip our feet, yep, metaphorically, into the soft, slightly perfumed twilight of the Ottoman world. The air hums with oud smoke and the sound of distant minarets calling the faithful to prayer. You're standing in a narrow street, paved with uneven stones, the Bosporus glittering somewhere to your left. The moonlight catches the curved toes of 1,000 slippers shuffling past, red, green, gold-threaded, some patched, some perfect. You're about to find out why a humble pair of shoes once held the power to reveal your class, your piety, and even your secrets. You probably won't survive this in one piece. Mentally, I mean. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this strange little family of night owls stretches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward, sandals whispering against the cobblestones, and immediately you're aware that slippers in this place aren't just about comfort. In the Ottoman world, they're identity cards, passports, and silent performers in the theater of etiquette. The empire sprawls across continents, and each footstep, bare or shod, echoes politics. You glance down. Your slippers, let's say crimson with a tiny upturned tip, would work you as someone neither noble nor poor, but careful. Practical elegance. The kind of person who keeps an ear open and a mouth shut, which, in Ottoman Constantinople, is just another way of staying alive. You pass a man whose slippers are stitched with gold thread so bright you almost squint. He's not royalty, but he wants you to think he might be. That's the thing about Ottoman footwear. It's theater for the feet. Historians still argue whether the slipper originated as a purely indoor courtesy or a symbol of public status. Either way, the result is the same. Every step you take says something about you. The empire's elites walked in soft leather babouches, supple enough to make no sound on marble floors. Silence here equals dignity. The slipper becomes a metaphor for control, for keeping one's noise, and by extension one's ambition, contained. You can practically hear the unspoken etiquette. Walk softly, carry influence quietly. A mainstream historical fact, sure. In the 16th century, Ottoman law actually regulated footwear colors according to social rank. Judges could wear black, scholars brown, and ordinary folk were left with more humble hues, yellows, tans, or dull reds. The point wasn't aesthetics, it was order. Even your feet had to know their place. But there's a quirky twist. Some superstitious instabilities believed a slipper left upside down invited misfortune, or worse, jinn. Imagine the anxiety every time you kicked off your shoes at the door. Was it right side up, or had you just summoned an invisible guest with a taste for chaos? You walk past a candlelit stall, where a cobbler bends over his work. His fingers are quick, his beard singed from too many hours over the oil lamp. He hums an old tune, something about lost love and unpaid debt, which, honestly, might be the same thing. His shop smells of tanned leather, sesame oil, and faint despair. You watch as he rubs a slipper with beeswax, polishing it until it gleams like a sunset trapped in leather. You lean in, curious, and he mutters without looking up. You can tell a man's story by the creases in his shoes. Then, almost as an afterthought, and by how much he tries to hide them. You glance again at your crimson pair, suddenly self-conscious. The leather feels heavier now, thick with implication. Maybe this isn't just about fashion, it's about narrative. The soles record your route, but the stitching records your choices. A breeze drifts down from Galata, carrying the smell of roasted chestnuts and damp river stone. You imagine how many stories have crossed the street, merchants with swollen feet from walking the spice routes, janissaries pacing in tight formation, poets tiptoeing out of forbidden houses. Each step wears history thinner, but also deeper. There's a moment where you pass the entrance to a hammam, steam curling from its doorway. A boy sits outside guarding a pile of slippers, hundreds of them, all mismatched, all abandoned by the temporarily naked. It's strangely intimate, this pile of souls and sweat and surrender. A reminder that in the Ottoman world, to remove your slippers was to shed your social armor. Inside, everyone was just human, soft-footed, and equal beneath the tiled domes. You pause. A woman passes by, her veil trailing, her slippers pale blue and perfectly silent. She doesn't glance your way, but the sound, or absence of it, lingers. You think about how silence can be both power and erasure. The empire thrives on that duality, the visible hierarchy, the invisible negotiation beneath it. You chuckle softly, because, let's face it, humanity hasn't changed much. Swap the slippers for designer sneakers and the Topkapi courtiers for influencers, and it's the same game. Everyone wants to step quietly enough to seem effortless, but loud enough to be noticed. Historians still argue whether Ottoman fashion was a reflection of piety or politics. Was that restraint genuine humility, or just the most fashionable way to show off? Maybe both. The empire ran on paradox: gold-threaded simplicity, humble opulence, luxurious modesty. As you wander deeper into the quarter, the moon climbs higher, and the city hums its nocturnal song. Cats weave between your legs like smug diplomats. Somewhere, a muezzin clears his throat before the dawn call. The world smells of figs, leather, and a little bit of ambition. You find yourself near the seawall, where waves slap lazily at the stones. Someone's left a single slipper here, half-soaked, curling at the edges. You bend down. It's too fine for a fisherman, too worn for a noble. Perhaps it belonged to a messenger or a runaway. Either way, it's a relic now, a tiny rebellion turned artifact. You imagine its owner walking barefoot into the night, liberated or lost, probably both. Empires, after all, are built on the footprints of people who decided not to wear what they were told to. You stretch, yawn, feel the weight of centuries pressing softly on your shoulders like a well-worn cloak. The cobblestones beneath you have seen worse nights. The city never truly sleeps. It just shifts position, like a cat curling tighter. You step back into the street, the hem of your robe brushing against dust and memory. The slippers squeak faintly, because, let's be honest, even in history, there's no such thing as a perfect stride. Somewhere the cobbler laughs in his sleep, and a new day threatens to break, golden and indifferent. But for now, you walk, softly, steadily, almost reverently. You're beginning to understand that in the Ottoman world, power wasn't shouted. It was whispered through fabric, carried on scent, and expressed in the subtle slide of a slipper across a tiled floor. And if you listen closely, you can still hear it, the empire breathing beneath your feet, one step at a time. You keep walking, and soon the alley opens into the courtyards of Topkapi Palace, a world where even the wind feels rehearsed. You move through a maze of archways and marble, and your slippers make no sound, because here, sound itself is suspicious. Every movement whispers class, allegiance, and awareness of rank. You enter a long colonnade where courtiers shuffle like chess pieces. Each wears slippers that tell a silent story. The deep red of senior bureaucrats, the dark leather of scribes, the pale yellow of the eunuchs who control access to power. Your feet suddenly feel like imposters. It's the Sultan's domain now, the heart of the Ottoman machine, where even the seams of a shoe can be political. The scent of rosewater and lamp oil hangs in the air. Somewhere nearby, a reed flute plays a wandering melody. Lonely, unfinished, like a thought the empire never completed. You catch a glimpse of a servant carrying a tray of sherbet, his slippers made from plain camel hide. They flap softly with each step, a humble percussion beneath the palace symphony. And then, beyond the latticework of a golden door, you see them, the Sultan's own slippers. They rest on a velvet cushion, abandoned for the moment, embroidered with gold and tiny seed pearls. You half expect them to glow in the dim light. Their soles are perfectly flat, untouched by street grime. To wear such shoes is to float through the world untouched by consequence. There's a historical record, one of those polite palace chronicles that claims Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent owned over 60 pairs of slippers, each tailored for a specific ritual. One pair for morning prayers, another for diplomatic audiences, yet another for private leisure. Historians still argue whether those records are exaggerations or carefully curated propaganda. After all, nothing in the Ottoman court existed without a layer of performance. You imagine being the slipper maker chosen for such a commission. You'd measure imperial feet by proxy. No one simply fits the Sultan. The shoes must symbolize both dominion and humility, a contradiction every ruler tries to perfect. You'd stitch each seam under supervision, reciting prayers to ensure no evil eye hides between the threads. And when the work was done, you'd probably never see the Sultan wear them. That's the ultimate test of power. Even your handiwork doesn't belong to you. You walk deeper into the harem corridor, a space of polished marble and muted voices. The floors gleamed so brightly you can almost see your reflection, except your slippers blur it, muting your shape. The guards watch without watching, trained to see motion but not emotion. You wonder if they ever envy the Sultan's soft shoes, while theirs are thick, hard, designed for endurance. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Ottoman palace etiquette forbade servants from showing the soles of their slippers to anyone of higher rank. It was considered almost as rude as speaking out of turn. So imagine all the subtle gymnastics required to move gracefully, bowing, turning, backing away, never exposing a forbidden angle of leather. You try it yourself and nearly trip over your own dignity. The Sultan's private garden smells of citrus and salt. Birds sing with what you'd swear is bureaucratic precision. The trees are pruned into obedience. You tread along a pebbled path leading to a small pavilion overlooking the Bosphorus, and here the silence is more than formality. It's ritual. You feel the empire breathe through architecture. Each column is a sermon, each fountain a metaphor. The slippers you wear seem to adjust, becoming more deliberate, as if you're aware that you're walking through centuries of protocol. You spot a young page, no older than 15, standing by the doorway, polishing a pair of crimson slippers with a piece of silk. He glances at you, nervous, then returns to his task. You ask quietly what he's doing. He whispers, preparing for the morning audience. The Sultan's mood shows in the shine. I smile. And if it's not shiny enough? He looks up, dead serious. I pray my feet still fit these by sunset. You both laugh softly, though his laughter carries a note of truth that prickles the air. The palace runs on fear, dressed as respect, affection disguised as obedience. A guard passes by, his heavy boots striking the marble like punctuation. You can almost feel the hierarchy through sound. Soft slippers for the powerful, loud boots for the expendable. Every step says, "This is who I am allowed to be." You drift toward the audience hall where the Sultan meets his viziers. The carpets here are so thick your feet sink a little, like walking on wealth itself. On a dais, another pair of slippers waits, these ones made of deep indigo velvet, the color reserved for authority. Historians still argue whether the Sultan's footwear changed according to religious significance or simply personal mood. Was blue a sign of divine favor, or just the Ottoman equivalent of a casual Friday? You'll never know, and that's the charm. The palace thrives on mystery. It's the perfume that keeps power from smelling too human. The air feels heavy with incense and intrigue. You imagine the conversations held here, whispers about wars, betrayals, and budgets, all conducted by men whose feet never touch the common ground. The irony doesn't escape you. These rulers, born to command armies, spend their lives walking on rugs instead of soil. I brush my hand across the edge of a low table, feel the cool inlay of mother of pearl. The palace hums like a perfectly tuned instrument, and you realize something subtle. The Ottoman court doesn't just manage politics, it choreographs them. Every gesture, every step, every shuffle of a slipper across carpet is diplomacy. There's a faint rustle near the far wall, and you notice a cat. Fat, smug, entirely unbothered by decorum, stalking between the slippers of sleeping guards. You grin. Some power transcends protocol. You pause near a fountain, its water looping endlessly in a shallow basin, a metaphor, if ever there was one. The Sultan's world, you realize, is both ornate and fragile, like walking on silk stretched too thin. One wrong step, and everything ripples. Your slippers slide forward again, and you think of all those who've walked these halls before you, viziers with trembling hearts, poets summoned for flattery, concubines whose fate was sealed by a single misstep. Each left invisible footprints in the marble, faint but permanent. You remember the cobbler from the first section, the one who said every crease tells a story. Here, in the palace, even the absence of creases tells a story. Smooth soles mean safety, immunity, distance from hardship. But smoothness is also fragility. It means you've never had to grip the earth to stand your ground. A stray memory surfaces, an Ottoman proverb: "He who does not soil his shoes cannot clean his soul." You smile at the contradiction. The Sultan's soul, then, must be spotless, or utterly untouched. The muezzin's call echoes again, fainter this time, like the empire reminding itself to breathe. You take one last look at the Sultan's golden slippers resting on their cushion. They're beautiful, sure, but they also look lonely, like a pair of trophies too delicate to wear. You back away slowly, careful not to expose your soles, and as you exit through the colonnade, the marble cools your feet through the thin leather. The palace looms behind you, serene and watchful. You can almost hear the sigh of history, the kind that sounds a lot like soft footsteps fading down a long, polished hall. Outside, the night feels freer. You stretch, roll your ankles, and realize that out here you can walk however you please. The cobblestones welcome noise, the wind doesn't care about etiquette, and the moon doesn't ask your rank. Still, the memory of those golden slippers lingers, their silence heavier than any sound you've ever heard. You step out of the palace gates and into the waking chaos of the city, where slippers lose their quiet dignity and join the orchestra of daily survival. The air is thicker here, heavy with the smell of fish, sweat, and sweet syrup dripping from trays of baklava. The Bosporus wind tousles your robe. You head toward the Grand Bazaar, and the rhythm of the crowd swallows you whole. Here, slippers aren't symbols of restraint, they're declarations of hustle. Cobblers shout prices, mules clatter on cobblestones, and soldiers stomp through, their boots kicking up the dust of politics. Somewhere a dervish hums a tune that makes you feel both grounded and dizzy. You pass stalls where slippers hang in clusters like ripened fruit, ruby red, emerald green, saffron yellow, each promising to turn you into someone else. You can smell the leather long before you see the tanners. It's a raw animal scent that mixes with the sweetness of figs and the acrid tang of dye. One old man waves you closer, brandishing a slipper stitched with mirrored beads. "Look, Effendi, walk in these and even the moon will envy your reflection." You grin, half tempted. He leans in, whispering conspiratorially, "And they make you taller in spirit, if not in leg." That last bit earns him your coin. The market is more than commerce, it's commentary. Each pair of slippers carries its own political pulse. Red ones signal prosperity, yellow whispers of servitude, black declares authority. Historians still argue whether these color codes originated from imperial decree or just evolved through habit and gossip. But everyone agrees you wore your allegiance on your feet. And sometimes that got people in trouble. A mainstream historical fact, in the early 19th century, during one of those delightful Ottoman moments of unrest, and there were plenty, a new footwear regulation required janissaries, those elite, occasionally mutinous soldiers, to wear standardized boots rather than soft slippers. The change was meant to enforce discipline. Ironically, it helped spark rebellion. Nothing like new shoes to remind an army it's being controlled. You wander past a row of cobblers arguing about the latest price of goat leather. One of them slams a slipper down, sending dust into the sunlight. "This," he declares, "is what started last year's fight." You raise an eyebrow. He points to a mismatched pair on display. "That fool over there," he jerks a thumb at his neighbor, "sold 2 left shoes to the governor's nephew. The boy tripped during parade, broke his nose, and suddenly we were all accused of mockery." You laugh, but it's a nervous kind of laughter. In this city, satire can be fatal, even when it comes from your shoes. As you continue deeper into the bazaar, the air grows thicker, hotter. The press of bodies becomes almost hypnotic. A boy brushes past you, carrying a stack of slippers on his head like a precarious crown. You catch one as it falls, soft red leather with a pointed toe, embroidered in gold thread. He thanks you breathlessly. "For my uncle's stall. The governor's wife wants them in green this week." You hand it back, smiling at the thought of a noblewoman picking her political palette. There's a rhythm to the bazaar, a steady percussion of footsteps, bargaining, laughter, and occasional shouting. You realize the market isn't just a place of trade, it's a parliament of feet. Every sound underfoot tells you who holds power and who pretends to. You pause at a coffee house, tucked between 2 stalls. Inside, smoke curls lazily toward the ceiling, and a storyteller sits cross-legged, gesturing with a worn slipper as his prop. You slip inside and take a seat. "And so the janissary," the storyteller declares, waving the slipper, "threw his shoe at the vizier." The crowd gasped. The vizier said, "You dare strike me with your foot?" And the janissary replied, "No, Effendi, just showing you where the empire stands." The crowd bursts into laughter, some a little too loudly, others a little too nervously. You sip bitter coffee and think about how humor thrives even under censorship. Maybe that's why slippers make such good metaphors. They're humble, unthreatening, soft enough to slip past censors, yet sturdy enough to kick authority in the shins. Outside, the shouting grows louder. 2 merchants argue over whose slippers are truly Damascus leather. One grabs a shoe and brandishes it like a weapon. The crowd gathers, eager for drama. You edge closer because, let's be honest, who doesn't love a good sandal scandal? The fight escalates until an officer appears, his boots loud enough to command instant silence. "Enough," he bellows, glaring at the pair. "Do you wish to start another slipper mutiny?" The crowd chuckles uneasily, dispersing. You glance around. Everyone knows he isn't entirely joking. The memory of past revolts still clings to these streets like the smell of smoke. A fringe tidbit. There's an old legend that during one riot in Istanbul, protesters filled slippers with stones and hurled them at palace gates. Not the most aerodynamic weapon, but apparently quite symbolic. When the guards collected them later, they found hundreds of pairs, each one marked with its owner's name, as if to say, "We walk away from this rule." Whether that story is true or not, no one really cares. The idea of it is what keeps the legend alive. You wander past a spice merchant, your nose flooded with cinnamon, saffron, and a hint of gunpowder. A donkey brays nearby, and someone curses in 3 languages. The sound of trade is messy, human, alive. You love it. This is the Ottoman Empire at its most honest, less about decrees and more about daily negotiations. A woman in a purple shawl passes you, balancing a basket of slippers. She winks.
"You have palace feet," she says teasingly. "Too clean." You glance down at your shoes, still mostly spotless despite the dust. "Maybe," you reply, "but they've been places." She laughs, the kind of laugh that suggests she's been to more. You stop at a bridge overlooking the Golden Horn. Below, ferrymen shuffle in and out of boats, their feet bare and calloused. The water glimmers with discarded sandals lost to tides and temper. Each slipper seems like a tiny ghost of an argument gone too far. Historians still argue whether the bizarre riots that punctuated Ottoman history were truly about economics or dignity. Some say they were protests against inflation, others claim they were symbolic foot stomps, citizens reminding the empire that even the softest souls can make noise. The sun begins to set, and the bazaar glows like a lantern. The day winds down, but the market never really sleeps. Somewhere, a cobbler hammers the last nail of the night. You watch sparks fly from the metal, reflecting in his tired eyes. The air hums with a tired satisfaction, the kind that comes from surviving another day of bargaining and banter. You sit for a moment on a low stone bench, legs aching, and realize your slippers have gathered a film of dust. They look different now, lived in, like you've earned your place in the city's choreography. You run your thumb along the crease and think of the Sultan's pristine pair resting on velvet. Funny how perfection always looks lonelier than wear. A cat jumps onto your lap, claiming you as temporary furniture. You scratch its chin absently and watch the crowd thin. Night creeps in, wrapping the city in indigo. Somewhere, a flute begins to play again, the same melody you heard at Topkapi, now freer, looser, more human. You stretch, stand, and look back toward the palace lights on the hill. The empire feels smaller from here, more fragile. Maybe it always was, just a pair of slippers too fine for the road they walked. You turn toward the darker streets where new stories wait, and your slippers sigh against the stones like they're ready for mischief. After all, revolutions don't always start with a gunshot. Sometimes it's just one quiet step in the wrong pair of shoes.
You keep walking, and soon the alley opens into the courtyards of Topkapi Palace, a world where even the wind feels rehearsed. You move through a maze of archways and marble, and your slippers make no sound. Because here, sound itself is suspicious. Every movement whispers class, allegiance, and awareness of rank. You enter a long colonnade where courtiers shuffle like chess pieces. Each wears slippers that tell a silent story. The deep red of senior bureaucrats, the dark leather of scribes, the pale yellow of the eunuchs who control access to power. Your feet suddenly feel like imposters. It's the Sultan's domain now, the heart of the Ottoman machine, where even the seams of a shoe can be political. The scent of rosewater and lamp oil hangs in the air. Somewhere nearby, a reed flute plays a wandering melody. Lonely, unfinished, like a thought the empire never completed. You catch a glimpse of a servant carrying a tray of sherbet, his slippers made from plain camel hide. They flap softly with each step, a humble percussion beneath the palace symphony. And then, beyond the latticework of a golden door, you see them, the Sultan's own slippers. They rest on a velvet cushion, abandoned for the moment, embroidered with gold and tiny seed pearls. You half expect them to glow in the dim light. Their soles are perfectly flat, untouched by street grime. To wear such shoes is to float through the world untouched by consequence. There's a historical record, one of those polite palace chronicles that claims Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent owned over 60 pairs of slippers, each tailored for a specific ritual. One pair for morning prayers, another for diplomatic audiences, yet another for private leisure. Historians still argue whether those records are exaggerations or carefully curated propaganda. After all, nothing in the Ottoman court existed without a layer of performance. You imagine being the slipper maker chosen for such a commission. You'd measure imperial feet by proxy. No one simply fits the Sultan. The shoes must symbolize both dominion and humility, a contradiction every ruler tries to perfect. You'd stitch each seam under supervision, reciting prayers to ensure no evil eye hides between the threads. And when the work was done, you'd probably never see the Sultan wear them. That's the ultimate test of power. Even your handiwork doesn't belong to you. You walk deeper into the harem corridor, a space of polished marble and muted voices. The floors gleamed so brightly you can almost see your reflection, except your slippers blur it, muting your shape. The guards watch without watching, trained to see motion but not emotion. You wonder if they ever envy the Sultan's soft shoes, while theirs are thick, hard, designed for endurance. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Ottoman palace etiquette forbade servants from showing the soles of their slippers to anyone of higher rank. It was considered almost as rude as speaking out of turn. So imagine all the subtle gymnastics required to move gracefully, bowing, turning, backing away, never exposing a forbidden angle of leather. You try it yourself and nearly trip over your own dignity. The Sultan's private garden smells of citrus and salt. Birds sing with what you'd swear is bureaucratic precision. The trees are pruned into obedience. You tread along a pebbled path leading to a small pavilion overlooking the Bosphorus, and here the silence is more than formality. It's ritual. You feel the empire breathe through architecture. Each column is a sermon, each fountain a metaphor. The slippers you wear seem to adjust, becoming more deliberate, as if you're aware that you're walking through centuries of protocol. You spot a young page, no older than 15, standing by the doorway, polishing a pair of crimson slippers with a piece of silk. He glances at you, nervous, then returns to his task. You ask quietly what he's doing. He whispers, preparing for the morning audience. The Sultan's mood shows in the shine. I smile. And if it's not shiny enough? He looks up, dead serious. I pray my feet still fit these by sunset. You both laugh softly, though his laughter carries a note of truth that prickles the air. The palace runs on fear, dressed as respect, affection disguised as obedience. A guard passes by, his heavy boots striking the marble like punctuation. You can almost feel the hierarchy through sound. Soft slippers for the powerful, loud boots for the expendable. Every step says, "This is who I am allowed to be." You drift toward the audience hall where the Sultan meets his viziers. The carpets here are so thick your feet sink a little, like walking on wealth itself. On a dais, another pair of slippers waits, these ones made of deep indigo velvet, the color reserved for authority. Historians still argue whether the Sultan's footwear changed according to religious significance or simply personal mood. Was blue a sign of divine favor, or just the Ottoman equivalent of a casual Friday? You'll never know, and that's the charm. The palace thrives on mystery. It's the perfume that keeps power from smelling too human. The air feels heavy with incense and intrigue. You imagine the conversations held here, whispers about wars, betrayals, and budgets, all conducted by men whose feet never touch the common ground. The irony doesn't escape you. These rulers, born to command armies, spend their lives walking on rugs instead of soil. I brush my hand across the edge of a low table, feel the cool inlay of mother of pearl. The palace hums like a perfectly tuned instrument, and you realize something subtle. The Ottoman court doesn't just manage politics, it choreographs them. Every gesture, every step, every shuffle of a slipper across carpet is diplomacy. There's a faint rustle near the far wall, and you notice a cat. Fat, smug, entirely unbothered by decorum, stalking between the slippers of sleeping guards. You grin. Some power transcends protocol. You pause near a fountain, its water looping endlessly in a shallow basin, a metaphor, if ever there was one. The Sultan's world, you realize, is both ornate and fragile, like walking on silk stretched too thin. One wrong step, and everything ripples. Your slippers slide forward again, and you think of all those who've walked these halls before you, viziers with trembling hearts, poets summoned for flattery, concubines whose fate was sealed by a single misstep. Each left invisible footprints in the marble, faint but permanent. You remember the cobbler from the first section, the one who said every crease tells a story. Here, in the palace, even the absence of creases tells a story. Smooth soles mean safety, immunity, distance from hardship. But smoothness is also fragility. It means you've never had to grip the earth to stand your ground. A stray memory surfaces, an Ottoman proverb: "He who does not soil his shoes cannot clean his soul." You smile at the contradiction. The Sultan's soul, then, must be spotless, or utterly untouched. The muezzin's call echoes again, fainter this time, like the empire reminding itself to breathe. You take one last look at the Sultan's golden slippers resting on their cushion. They're beautiful, sure, but they also look lonely, like a pair of trophies too delicate to wear. You back away slowly, careful not to expose your soles, and as you exit through the colonnade, the marble cools your feet through the thin leather. The palace looms behind you, serene and watchful. You can almost hear the sigh of history, the kind that sounds a lot like soft footsteps fading down a long, polished hall. Outside, the night feels freer. You stretch, roll your ankles, and realize that out here you can walk however you please. The cobblestones welcome noise, the wind doesn't care about etiquette, and the moon doesn't ask your rank. Still, the memory of those golden slippers lingers, their silence heavier than any sound you've ever heard.
The morning returns, honey gold and a little too bright. You blink awake to the sound of mule hooves on cobblestone, that steady clop-clop rhythm of commerce making its way through the arteries of the empire. You stretch, slip back into your worn slippers and feel the faint chill of dawn through the leather. The city already hums with the low murmur of trade, the true heartbeat of Ottoman politics, disguised as commerce, perfumed by spice. You head toward the docks, where the Bosporus breathes mist over the ships. There, between stacked crates of silk and dates, the empire performs another ritual: exchange. And if you look closely, you see it. Slippers again. Everywhere. The dock workers' simple hide shoes scuff against the planks. Merchants in soft velvet glide past. Venetian traders strut in their pointed foreign styles. It's a parade of souls, and every pair tells a story. The mainstream historical fact drifts in with the salt air. By the 16th century, the Ottoman Empire's trade routes stretched across 3 continents, pulling in goods from Venice, Cairo, Aleppo, and far beyond. Slippers, yes, slippers, were among the quiet ambassadors of that network. Istanbul's leatherwork was prized from Dubrovnik to Delhi. European nobles wore Ottoman-style slippers at home, pretending to lounge like sultans while sipping imported coffee they didn't yet know how to pronounce. You pass a merchant who's unloading a crate marked with the crescent seal of the imperial tannery. Inside, soft, shining slippers dyed in impossible colors. The smell of leather mixes with seaweed and sweat. You reach down, touch one pair. Smooth as cream, faintly warm from the sun. Venetians ordered those, the merchant says, catching your interest. They want everything soft but strong, like us. He grins, and you can't tell if it's pride or irony. Maybe both. Imported souls, exported souls. That's how it feels. Each shipment of slippers carrying not just leather, but identity, artistry, a little sliver of empire. You imagine the Venetian courtiers opening these boxes, inhaling the scent of Ottoman dye, pretending to understand its meaning. They don't, but they want the look. A fringe tidbit.
Some Venetian shoemakers secretly smuggled Ottoman slipper patterns to copy them at home, disguising their imports under local names like Pianelle or Zoccoli. You chuckle imagining a doge's wife strutting through her palazzo in what was basically a repainted Istanbul design. Cultural appropriation? More like cultural admiration. Very well paid. You walk along the dock until you reach a small tea stall. The owner, a wiry old man with a smile like cracked porcelain, hands you a glass without asking. "You're watching the ships," he says, voice low. "Everyone's watching the ships. That's where the empire breathes." You sip. He's right. Every arrival, every departure shifts the empire's pulse a little. You wonder if anyone ever tracked power by slipper shipments. Historians still argue whether Ottoman trade policies were genuinely open or quietly manipulative, whether those exchanges built mutual prosperity or carefully woven dependence. Perhaps both. Trade was politics written in receipts, diplomacy disguised as fashion. And the slipper, humble as it seemed, was part of the negotiation. As the morning deepens, you follow a cart inland, its load piled high with textiles and shoes bound for the Grand Bazaar. You pass under the archway, where guards nod lazily, and instantly you're swallowed by the din of the marketplace again. Drums, haggling, laughter. The smell of tanned hide and cinnamon hits you full force. The slipper stalls are alive with color, crimson, emerald, saffron, indigo. Each pair seems to wink in the lantern light. You watch as a Greek merchant argues with a Syrian craftsman over thread quality, both slipping between Turkish and Arabic mid-sentence. You understand just enough to know that the argument isn't really about thread. It's about pride, about whose city does it better. You pause at a small booth where a woman stitches in silence. Her fingers move fast, each pull of the needle rhythmic as breath. On the table beside her lie finished pairs, tiny ones, for children, with embroidered tulips. "For export?" you ask, softly. She shakes her head. "For my daughter. She walks inside all day. I want her feet to dream." You don't know what to say to that, so you just nod. Dreaming, it seems, is a valid form of travel in this empire. A shadow crosses your path, a Venetian buyer, tall, perfumed, too pale for the Istanbul sun. He picks up a pair, inspects it, and sniffs disdainfully. "Too provincial," he mutters. The woman doesn't even look up. "Then your feet can stay unhappy." You bite back a laugh. Some diplomacy doesn't need translation. Later, you step out into the sunlight again, your slippers carrying the dust of both dock and bazaar. You walk uphill toward Galata, where European merchants keep their warehouses, their accents, and their secrets. Here, the footwear changes again. High heels imported from Paris, stiff leather boots from Vienna. You look down at your own soft pair and feel the difference like an argument under your feet. Modern fashion is creeping in, one shipment at a time. The Ottoman cobblers try to imitate it, but something always feels off. Ottoman feet aren't built for stiff shoes. They crave softness, silence, flexibility. Still, the pressure grows. Western style equals modernity now. To wear imported shoes is to declare oneself worldly, reformed, enlightened, or at least pretending to be. You reach the top of the hill where a cluster of diplomats gathers outside a coffee house. Their shoes gleam like weapons. You slide your worn slippers under your chair and listen. They talk of trade deals, treaties, tariffs, words that sound important but mean little to the workers sweating below. The empire trades leather and silk, but what it really sells, you realize, is the illusion of civility. As the afternoon heat thickens, you wander back down. The call to prayer floats across the rooftops again, weaving through the noise of business. You pass the same merchant from earlier, now closing his crates. "Venetians paid double," he says proudly. "Do they ever pay enough?" "For us, never. For them, always too much." You both laugh. You stop at the edge of the quay, watch a ship ease away from the dock, its hull heavy with goods. You imagine the sailors below deck, their feet slipping across the wet planks, wearing simple slippers that no one will ever see. The Empire sails on the souls of the invisible. The sun dips low, painting the water bronze. You feel a quiet ache, the sense that every trade leaves something behind, not just goods, but stories, little pieces of identity smuggled along with the cargo. You turn toward home, the smell of salt fading behind you, replaced by the evening's incense and roasting chestnuts. Your slippers, scuffed now from a long day, whisper on the stones. You imagine them speaking, tiny diplomats themselves, fluent in dust and silence. Before you reach your door, you pass a boy sitting cross-legged on the curb, polishing a pair of men's slippers to a mirror shine. He looks up at you. "Trade?" he offers. "For what?" He smiles. "Stories. You've got the face of someone who walks far." You hand him a coin instead. "Keep your stories. You'll need them." He shrugs, and you walk on, realizing how even the smallest acts of exchange shape the empire's rhythm. Every coin, every thread, every footprint. You slip inside your quiet room again, kick off your slippers, and let your feet breathe. Outside, somewhere on the water, another ship creaks into the dark, carrying your day's observations away. Soft souls traveling toward strange shores, carrying both the empire's pride and its fragility. You fall asleep to the sound of gulls crying over the Bosporus, their voices thin but persistent, like trade winds whispering of all the worlds yet to touch.
Night falls again, and Istanbul exhales. The skyline softens into silhouette, mosques like sleeping giants, bridges strung with amber light. You walk along the old cobblestones, slippers whispering against the street as if afraid to wake the city. The hum of traffic fades behind you, replaced by the steady lapping of water along the quay. Somewhere nearby, an old radio plays an Ottoman waltz, its melody crackling through static. You smile, recognizing the tune. It's one your grandmother used to hum while sweeping the courtyard, her feet tucked into those soft felt slippers she bought every year from the same bazaar stall. She'd scold you for wearing them outside, but you did anyway. Back then, rebellion was as simple as dirt on fabric soles. You glance down. The slippers you wear now aren't so different. The colors faded, the stitching loose, one tassel missing. Yet they've survived 10 streets, 2 arguments, and a drizzle that threatened to wash the dye right off. Survival, you think, is their best feature. You turn into a narrow alley, drawn by the scent of roasting chestnuts and memory. The vendor stands beneath a flickering lamp, the same one who's been here for decades, or maybe just someone who learned his stance, his rhythm, his quiet dignity. You buy a handful, the paper warm in your palms, and as you take a bite, the taste takes you further back than you expect. Back to courtyards lit by oil lamps, laughter echoing through marble halls, slippers lined neatly by the door in quiet submission. You chew slowly, each bite softer, more contemplative. A mainstream historical fact slides into focus. By the early 20th century, when the Ottoman Empire finally fell, many of its customs, like removing shoes before entering a home or mosque, did not vanish. They transcended politics, embedding themselves into daily ritual. The empire died, but etiquette endured. And etiquette, you realize, is its own kind of empire, silent, stubborn, and omnipresent. You walk on, past graffiti that spells new slogans over old stone. Some words fade beneath layers of paint, but others peek through like ghosts refusing to be erased. You trace your fingers along a crack in the wall and think about how time does the same thing to memory, layers it, fractures it, preserves it by accident. Historians still argue whether the Ottoman fall was inevitable or orchestrated, whether it crumbled from within or was carved apart from without. But standing here, where marble meets asphalt and Arabic calligraphy meets neon signage, it seems clear that empires don't truly fall, they just sink into the souls of those who walk their remains. You stop at a quiet corner where an antique shop glows faintly behind dusty glass. Inside, among clocks, lamps, and worn Qurans, a single pair of slippers sits perched on a velvet cushion. Deep crimson, gold thread curling in delicate spirals, unmistakably Ottoman. A tiny tag reads, "Price on request." You step closer. The shopkeeper appears, ancient and amused. "You have an eye for lost things," he says softly. "They have an eye for me," you reply. He chuckles. "You won't find their match anywhere. Hand-stitched in Bursa, nearly 2 centuries old." You nod, gazing at the slippers. They seem impossibly alive, like they might blink if you looked away. "Do you buy these to wear?" you ask. He shakes his head. No one dares. They buy them to display, to say, "I remember." You smile. Remembering's easier when your feet are comfortable. He laughs again. "You speak like a poet." "Just tired," you say, and turning to leave. "Wait," he calls. "Would you like to try them on?" You freeze. Every rational part of you says no. Artifacts are to be preserved, not lived in. But another voice, the one that's been narrating your entire life tonight, whispers, "Go on. History doesn't bite." So you slip off your worn pair and slide into the crimson ones. They're warm, too warm almost, as if the years trapped in the stitching are still exhaling. The fit is perfect, absurdly so. You take a cautious step, then another. The shop creaks beneath you. In that moment, you feel every footstep ever taken in this city. The sultans pacing their balconies, the merchants trudging through markets, the servants sweeping marble corridors, the mothers rocking babies to sleep. Every sound, every scent, every sigh, all folded neatly beneath your toes. You exhale slowly. "They remember everything," you whisper. The shopkeeper nods, his eyes gleaming. "All good shoes do." You look down again, and for a moment the world blurs. The shop fades, the lights dim, and you're in another time, a tiled courtyard under moonlight, a fountain trickling nearby, laughter muffled through silk curtains. You can hear distant footsteps, soft as breath, and you realize something profound. Maybe the politics of slippers were never really about power or status or comfort. Maybe they were about continuity, the quiet, stubborn persistence of identity even as everything else burns and rebuilds around it. You take a step back, then another, and when the vision fades, the shopkeeper is still smiling. "You see, we never stopped walking, we just changed floors." You slip the slippers off gently, place them back on the velvet cushion, and nod. "Keep them safe." He tilts his head. "They're safer than we are." Outside, the city hums again, buses sighing, cats darting, minarets blowing faintly in the distance. You put on your old pair once more. They feel lighter now, as if the ghosts have gone ahead to clear the path. You walk home slowly, every step tracing both past and present, every street corner whispering stories your ancestors left behind in the dust. The air cools, the Bosporus glitters like silk. Somewhere, a muezzin's call drifts low and melancholy, threading through the city like a lullaby. You pause at the water's edge, watch the reflections tremble, and feel something loosen in your chest. The Ottoman slippers, you realized, were never just garments. They were geography, soft maps of memory, portable empires. And you, somehow, are still walking their borders.
The next time you open your eyes, the world is quieter. The factories still hum, but farther away now, softened by distance, or maybe by time. You step outside, and the air feels strangely clean, too clean. The city smells not of tanneries or sea salt, but of polished stone and dustless glass. Your slippers tap softly on marble floors that weren't here before. You've walked, somehow, into the future. The Ottoman Empire is gone, dissolved like sugar in tea. Yet here you are, in a museum that smells faintly of lemon polish and curated memory. The walls are pale, the lighting gentle, the silence immaculate. Somewhere, a guard coughs discreetly, and you realize you're standing before a display case. Inside it, 3 pairs of slippers. The first pair is embroidered in gold thread, curling into tulip patterns that shimmer even under sterile light. The placard reads, "Ceremonial Slippers of Sultan Mahmud II, circa 1830. You let out a low whistle. The soles look untouched, as if they never touched dirt, as if power itself hovers above the ground. The next pair is simpler. Faded red leather, soft at the edges, a single tear across the heel. The sign says they belong to a palace servant, anonymous, no date. The third pair is smaller still, child-sized, blue with frayed tassels. No name, just recovered near Bursa, 1910. You stare at them a long while. The silence in the room feels heavier than it should. These slippers, once loud with life, now whisper only through glass. A mainstream historical fact clicks into your thoughts. By the early 20th century, the Ottoman legacy was being carefully rewritten, archived, sanitized, arranged for display. The New Republic wanted progress, not nostalgia, and so things once ordinary, like slippers, were elevated into artifacts, stripped of the very dust that gave them meaning. You step closer, your reflection merging with the display. For a fleeting moment, you see yourself wearing them, one foot in royal gold, one in servant's red, one in the child's worn blue. The empire, in 3 steps: ambition, endurance, loss. A child's voice behind you breaks the spell. "Mama, why don't people wear these anymore?" Her mother smiles absently. "They were for a different time, darling. People wear better shoes now." Better. You almost laugh. Better for walking, maybe, but not for remembering. You wander onward, passing more displays. Caftans, pipes, ink pots, coins. The slippers reappear now and then, tucked into corners, half forgotten beneath grander relics. One pair bears scorch marks on the toes. Another still smells faintly of musk oil, sealed forever in scentless air. You pause at a low bench and sit, the floor cool beneath your feet. You imagine the museum at night, after the guards leave and the lights dim. Do the slippers sigh, missing the warmth of human skin? Do they remember the rhythm of prayers, the shuffle of marketplaces, the hush of marble corridors? A fringe tidbit drifts into mind. During the early years of the Republic, collectors sometimes smuggled old Ottoman slippers abroad, selling them to European museums as exotic curiosities. Some were mislabeled as Persian or Moroccan just to fetch a better price. You picture a lonely pair sitting in some London case, labeled incorrectly, but too polite to correct anyone. Historians still argue whether the museification of Ottoman culture was preservation or erasure, whether these displays saved the past or sealed it away. Maybe both. A slipper behind glass, after all, is both honored and imprisoned. You rise and move to the next hall. The air is cooler here, the lights dimmer. A faint recording of Ottoman music is playing somewhere overhead, too crisp to feel real. You follow it like a ghost until it leads you to a grand mural of Istanbul in the 1800s. You recognize it immediately. Domes, minarets, the glinting Bosporus. But in this painted version, the people are perfect, clean, smiling, motionless. You can't help murmuring, "You forgot the noise." A museum attendant looks up. "Sorry?" You smile. "Nothing, just talking to the shoes." She laughs nervously and walks away. You continue exploring, slipping between eras. The Sultan's shoes, the merchants, the harems, the pilgrims, each one
a quiet witness. You feel like they're watching you back, studying how you walk, wondering if your steps carry the same weight of meaning theirs once did. Toward the end of the exhibit, you find something unexpected, a small installation titled Everyday Istanbul. Inside, displayed casually on a low platform, is a row of modern house slippers. Rubber soles, polyester fabric, mass-produced in China but sold in every Turkish home. The label reads, Continuity of Comfort, circa 2020. You grin. So the story never really ended, it just changed factories. You crouch, touch the edge of one. It's absurdly soft, but somehow cold, lifeless. You glance back toward the old slippers behind glass. The irony is thick enough to taste. The ancient ones imprisoned in reverence, the modern ones untouched because no one cares. You whisper to yourself, we've gone from worshiping what we walk on to not even noticing. The museum air feels too still. You head for the exit, slippers tapping against the marble, echoing faintly like a heartbeat in a hollow chest. Outside, daylight blinds you. The city stretches wide and loud again. Buses, vendors, schoolchildren, horns. The Istanbul of today may wear sneakers and heels, but the rhythm, beneath the noise, hasn't changed. You still feel the old empire in the way the city moves. The pauses before prayer, the sweeping gestures of shopkeepers, the hush that falls over the streets when the evening call rises. You walk downhill toward the waterfront, the museum's quiet replaced by gulls and traffic. The pavement feels warmer now, alive. You imagine the ghosts of the slippers walking beside you, velvet, silk, leather, each tracing the same old routes between mosque, market, and home. You stop at a small cafe and order tea. The waiter brings it with a smile, his own feet clad in worn plastic sandals. You raise your cup to him. Nice shoes, Abby. He grins. Comfort is political, Abby. You nearly choke on your tea laughing. He's right, of course. Always has been. You linger a while watching the crowd pass. Shoes of every kind, each step carrying a fragment of history, whether its wearer knows it or not. When the sun starts to drop, you drain your glass, pay your tab, and turn back toward the museum. You glance once more through its windows, where the old slippers rest in their curated stillness. Then you look down at your own feet. Your slippers are worn again at the heel. Perfect. You smile. Maybe this is the only right way to honor the past, not by preserving it, but by walking it ragged.
By dawn, the air tastes different. You step out into the street, and it smells faintly of machine oil instead of jasmine. Progress has a scent, and it's not particularly pleasant. Somewhere nearby, a hammer strikes metal in quick succession. Ping, ping, ping. You sigh, already missing the old rhythm of the cobbler's mallet, that slower, patient heartbeat of craft. Your slippers carry you toward the sound. The streets are busier than usual, lined with posters you don't recognize. They show men in crisp European suits, polished boots, and unfamiliar hats. A slogan in bold Ottoman script reads, "Renewal for the Empire." You mutter to yourself, renewal smells like burnt leather. You turn the corner and find what's making the noise. A newly opened factory, its brick walls still smelling of fresh mortar. Men and boys hurry in and out, carrying boxes of machine-made shoes. You watch the door swing open again and again, releasing bursts of metallic clatter and the sour scent of dye. The hand-stitched slipper, you realize, is being outpaced. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. By the late 19th century, industrialization began seeping into the Ottoman Empire, especially in port cities like Istanbul and Izmir. European machinery changed everything: cloth, glass, metalwork, even leather. Footwear once made by hand in candlelit stalls could now be churned out by the hundreds. You walk closer. A worker glances up from his task, face slicked with sweat. He's feeding a strip of hide into a loud contraption that punches holes with inhuman precision.
Does it make better shoes? You ask. He shrugs. Faster ones? Faster, you repeat, as if tasting the word. That's not the same as better. He grins, a little sad. Try telling that to someone who can finally afford 2 pairs. Fair point. Progress, you think, is always bought with a discount on dignity. You continue walking, your slippers brushing against sawdust and stray threads that spill from the factory. The noise follows you, rhythmic, relentless. You can almost hear history clicking into a new gear. A fringe tidbit comes to mind. Early factory workers sometimes refused to wear the shoes they made, calling them rossous, soulless. They preferred their own rough, handmade slippers instead, believing the human touch carried luck. You look down at your feet and smile. Guess that makes me sentimental. Further down the street, you pass a window displaying imported footwear, Parisian boots, Viennese pumps, Italian loafers, each pair arranged like tiny ambassadors of modernity. A clerk polishes them obsessively. You tap the glass and ask, "Do people really buy these?" He beams. "Of course. Everyone wants to look European now. Even the Sultan wears imported shoes." You shake your head. Imported shoes, imported ideals. He frowns slightly. Progress has to start somewhere. Maybe, but why does it always start at the feet? He doesn't answer, already distracted by the next customer, a young man in a crisp fez and eager grin. You slip away quietly, feeling the divide widening beneath you. Historians still argue whether modernization in the Ottoman Empire was genuine renewal or quiet surrender, whether it represented adaptation or assimilation. Maybe it depends on where you're standing, or what you're standing in. You wander toward the Galata Bridge, the wind tugging at your sleeves. Steamships whistle in the harbor, their iron hulls gleaming like promises. The Bosporus glitters with movement, boats, ferries, fishermen, tourists. You pause mid-span, looking down at the current. It feels faster than it used to. You imagine a fisherman below you, hauling up his nets with bare feet gripping the deck. He probably can't afford those machine-made shoes. His soles have their own armor, calluses thick as memory. You envy him for a second, his feet still fluent in the old ways. The day heats up quickly. By midday, the city buzzes with a strange new optimism. Gas lamps, telegraph poles, rumors of railways. The empire that once stretched on horseback now hums in wires and steam. And yet, you can't shake the feeling that something essential is slipping away, quietly, beneath the hum of invention. You find yourself back at the bazaar, though it feels emptier than before. Half the cobbler's stalls are shuttered, replaced by resellers hawking factory goods. The few artisans who remain work silently, their benches surrounded by the ghosts of vanished customers. You stop at one familiar face, the old craftsman who once embroidered the Sultan's initials into velvet. He's hunched over a single slipper, working so slowly you'd think he's afraid to finish it. "You're still here," you say softly. He glances up. "For now." "Still sewing for the palace?" He chuckles. "The palace wears Paris now. I sew for nostalgia." You sit beside him. The leather on his table smells faintly sweet, dyed with pomegranate rind, a technique older than half the empire. "Why keep at it?" you ask. He pauses. "Because machines don't love what they make." He holds up the slipper, thread glinting like gold in the lamplight. "This," he says, "is prayer disguised as craft." You nod. "And prayer disguised as resistance, maybe." He smiles. "Same thing sometimes." The afternoon slides toward evening. You leave him to his quiet devotion and wander the side streets, where children play barefoot, their laughter echoing between crumbling walls. You wonder what kind of empire they'll inherit, one built on soft steps or iron strides.
Near a fountain, a group of students debates loudly about reform. Their voices are full of fire, their feet clad in Western shoes polished to a mirror. You recognize the irony. They're marching toward freedom in borrowed souls. One of them notices you staring. "Hey, uncle? Old ways die hard." You grin. So do blisters. He laughs, but the others don't. They see your slippers and look away, respectful but pitying. You're a relic, you realize, comfortably outdated. As dusk settles, you return home. You light a lamp, its glow soft against the walls. The hum of machinery still carries through the city like distant thunder. You take off your slippers, run your fingers along the seams, and think about everything they've survived. Palaces, mosques, marketplaces, riots. Now they face their strangest challenge yet: irrelevance. You whisper, "Don't worry, we'll outlast fashion." You lie down and close your eyes. The world hums round you, restless and new. And though the empire is changing, trading silk for steel, prayer beads for telegraphs, you dream of soft steps echoing through marble halls, proof that modernity can never fully drown memory. Outside, a tram bell clangs somewhere in the distance, sharp and bright, slicing through the night like a command to move faster. But you roll over and smile into your pillow. Let the boots run ahead. Slippers will always find their way home.
The morning greets you not with birdsong, but with shouting. Boots, not slippers, stomping past your window. You sit up, heart thudding, and realize something's changed in the air. The sound carries the rhythm of unrest, the clipped pace of soldiers, the dull roar of argument rising like heat from the streets. You slide your slippers on instinctively, old friends now, soft and trustworthy, and open the shutters just enough to peek outside. A crowd churns at the end of the lane, men in turbans, apprentices, vendors, soldiers. Everyone's shouting, pointing, gesturing toward the main square. The scent of smoke rides on the wind. You step outside and follow, your slippers whispering over the cobblestones, the contrast almost comical against the thud of military boots. It's as if the city itself is arguing, soft versus hard, tradition versus reform. You don't need to ask what's happening. You've heard the murmurs for weeks. Taxes, uniforms, modernization. And at the center of it all, something as small as a pair of slippers can ignite revolt. You reach the square. The janissaries are there, the elite soldiers of the empire, long feared, long spoiled. They stand in their strange hybrid of military and ceremonial garb, a few still wearing soft indoor slippers under their armor, a quiet rebellion against the new European-style boots the Sultan has demanded. You blink. They look almost absurd, but no one laughs. A mainstream historical fact slides into place. In 1826, Sultan Mahmud II ordered the dissolution of the Janissary Corps after centuries of corruption and political interference. But before that brutal day came, there were years of smaller conflicts, disputes over pay, dress, and status. Footwear, oddly enough, became one of the loudest symbols of resistance. You move closer. One janissary slams his boot down beside a pair of slippers abandoned in the dust. "This," he shouts, "is what they want us to wear. European leather. March like foreigners. Forget who we are." The crowd murmurs, uneasy. A few nod. Others look down at their own feet, torn between comfort and obedience. A fringe tidbit surfaces from the back of your mind. Some soldiers supposedly sabotaged their new regulation boots by cutting slits in the soles so they'd wear out faster, a quiet act of defiance against imperial reform. You can't help but smirk. Even rebellion, it seems, has to start somewhere, and why not at the feet? A voice booms from the steps of the mosque. "Loyalty," it cries. "The Sultan commands it." The tension tightens like a bowstring. You take a cautious step back. The smell of oil and smoke thickens. Somewhere a drum starts beating, slow, ominous. You realize you're witnessing history in motion, barefoot ideals colliding with booted authority. Historians still argue whether these reforms were progress or betrayal, whether Mahmud II's European-style army saved the empire or hastened its decay. But here, in this square, it feels simple. Every stomp of a boot seems to crush something soft, something local, something familiar. You drift to the edge of the crowd where the Cobblers' Guild has gathered. The men whisper anxiously. "They'll make us obsolete," one says. "Who needs slippers when every man wears boots?" Another shakes his head. "Boots can't walk through mosques. Boots don't let your feet breathe. The world won't survive without soft shoes." You smile faintly. There's comfort in their stubborn faith. By noon, the shouting fades into exhaustion. You slip down a narrow alley and find refuge in a small tea shop where the air is thick with cardamom. The owner, round, calm, eyes like warm bread, nods at your dusty slippers. "Rough morning?" he asks. "Revolutionary," you grin. He chuckles softly. "Ah, then tea first, politics later." You sip slowly, feeling your heartbeat ease. Outside, the sound of boots fades down the hill. The city exhales. But something in you lingers on that image, the abandoned pair of slippers crushed under a soldier's heel. The metaphor writes itself, and you wish it didn't. You leave the tea shop and head toward the old city walls, needing space. The path is quiet, the stones ancient, the wind heavy with dust. You imagine all the feet that have passed this way, pilgrims, soldiers, slaves, merchants, each leaving invisible traces layered like sediment. Halfway up the slope, you meet an old woman sitting by the roadside. She's mending a slipper, the leather cracked and curling. Her fingers move slowly but precisely. "Yours?" you ask. She shakes her head. "My son's. He joined the new army. Says they gave him boots that smell like Europe." She chuckles, low and rough. "He hates them. Says they make his feet lonely." You crouch beside her. "Lonely?" "Yes," she says. "Slippers remember. Boots forget." You sit with that for a moment. The words feel truer than most decrees. You continue walking, the city stretching out below. From up here, Istanbul looks calm, almost holy, but you know better. Beneath the domes and minarets, the empire shifts restlessly, its people caught between comfort and progress. You remember the bazaar, the docks, the harem, all those soft spaces where slippers ruled, and now here on the threshold of modernity, the slipper finds itself exiled. Politics, you think, always starts with what touches the ground first. The sun begins to set, pouring copper light over the rooftops. You sit on a fallen column watching pigeons circle above. The call to prayer drifts through the air, faint but steady. Down below, the crowd disperses, leaving behind only footprints, both bare and booted. A mule cart rattles past, and you notice a single slipper lying in the road, trampled, half buried in dust. You pick it up, brush it off. The leather is thin, the embroidery faded. You can't tell if it belonged to a soldier, a merchant, or just some poor soul caught in the wrong crowd. You place it on a low wall, almost reverently, and whisper, "You did your job." As twilight deepens, you make your way home. The streets are calmer now, though the tension still hums beneath the surface. You pass a tavern where men argue in hushed voices about reform, faith, and pride. One of them gestures with his boot, another with his slipper. You think every debate begins in the same language, footwear, not words. At home, you sit by the window, legs stretched out, slippers dusty and tired. You can hear faint music from a nearby courtyard, a flute maybe, or just wind through the cracks. You think about thresholds, how every revolution begins at one. Between slipper and boot, between comfort and command, between yesterday and tomorrow. You wonder which side history will choose and whether it will remember how soft the ground once felt. Before bed, you set your slippers neatly by the door. They look ordinary, even humble. But after a day like this, they feel like witnesses, quiet, loyal, and maybe a little sad. Outside, the empire keeps shifting, trying to decide what kind of footsteps it wants to make next.
The soundscape fades now. Traffic softens into distant static. The sea turns to whisper, and even the gulls grow tired of circling. You feel the night stretching wider, longer, until it folds over you like a silk blanket. Your slippers, faithful companions through centuries of change, rest quietly by the door. They look almost sentient in the lamplight, creased, patient, waiting. The city outside hums with a rhythm you no longer need to keep up with. You let it drift away. The cobblestones, the bridges, the market stalls all dissolve into a comfortable blur. What remains is warmth, the faint scent of leather, and the memory of footsteps that refuse to vanish. You breathe in once more. The air tastes faintly of rosewater and dust, time itself distilled. Somewhere far away, a bell rings. Somewhere closer, a curtain sways. And in between those sounds, there is peace. You stretch your legs, feel the day slipping from your shoulders. The slippers seem to sigh with you, their seams relaxing, their history settling into sleep. The empire may be gone, the palaces turn to museums, but its softness lingers, in gestures, in silence, in the quiet luxury of comfort that outlives conquest. So you close your eyes. You let the centuries fade, one by one, until even the gold-threaded patterns melt into darkness. And in that gentle dark, you hear only one thing left: the sound of your own steady breath, the quiet echo of 1,000 soft steps finding rest. Sleep well, traveler. You've walked far enough tonight.